and let's get started.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody just so we can keep track here. And if you do have any questions, if you go to, can't remember whether it's reactions, I believe, you can raise your hand. And that way we don't have everybody in here hollering all at once. And we will turn this over to Marty. Go ahead and mute everybody. And Marty, you'll have to unmute to what you've done and go ahead with your presentation. And thank you.
Right. Thank you, Dave. And thank you, Rob, for the kind invitation to have me present about my two passions in life this morning. So give me 1 second to share my screen. See, can everybody see the full version of the presentation? Excellent.
Yes, we can.
So what I'd like to do today is present on parks on the air. There's a lot of information out there in the public domain. There's a lot of interesting YouTube channels that cover the topic. So what I thought I'd do this morning is not really go into too much detail about what Parks on the Air is, but focus more on one particular aspect that is becoming popular, and that is something called radar, or basically rapid deployment, which is parks on the air coupled to strategically mapping out a region and trying to cover as many different parks in a 24-hour period. And so I've been probably spending last half year sort of really trying to optimize different activations in our local community and state parks here. And the goal is in the coming year to orchestrate one of these radar events for participation. So without further ado, have to start by doing some disclaimers that some of my present and past employers require of me. So whenever I give a presentation to the public, no matter if it's topical or not, the topic relates to my usual work, I have to basically say that all my information I provide today is my own opinion, doesn't reflect any opinions that my present and past employers may or may not have had. So basically, I'm generally responsible for my own stunts. The other thing is I mentioned a couple products in today's presentation, and all these products are purchased by me. So there's no commercial interest involved here. So it's all based on my personal experience and liking. So having all that out of the way, I'd like to go straight into what is Parks on the Air. So Parks on the Air originated after a ARRL organized event. I used to be called the National Parks on the Air event, which happened in 2016. People went to national parks, and so HEM operators operated from these parks and tried to make as many QSOs as they could. Some of the participants then liked that experience so much that they decided to enthusiastically start their own organization that would pursue that type of operation on a more frequent and a regular basis. To my knowledge, they're not affiliated with ARRL, but the origins they borrowed from that 2016 event. So today, POTA, short for Parks on the Air, is a radio sport program that encourages the communication and portable operations from mostly state parks, and sometimes also specific trails like the Pacific Crest Trail. and certain national monuments. So these, the people that go to the field, they're called activators. And any ham with a HF rig can be a hunter. They can try and make a QSO with these activators. That information then gets logged, and each successful QSO counts toward a certificate, a program that POTA has established. The POTA organization today is managed by 4 principals, W3 AAX, W0ZAP, W8TIM, and WT8J. And it includes many activators and hunters and many volunteers that donate time or resources to keep the organization and the infrastructure and the computational backend working. As of last year, there are over 8,000 hams that have registered, and over 2 million QSOs have been logged on the POTA website. Anybody who's interested in the program or wants more information can go to the following URL, the Parks on the Air. And there's a lot of information about rules, about frequently asked questions, and so forth. Now, hunters, as I briefly mentioned, so anybody can be a hunter. You don't have to go to a park. You can do that from your shack at home. And you can basically make QSOs with activators, the folks that are out in the parks. A good time to do that is usually on Saturday and Sunday morning. So probably right now there's a lot of activity, especially in East Coast parks. And if you don't want to, you don't actually need to register as a hunter. As long as you have a successful QSO, the activator, the person in the field, they can log the QSO, and that would count for them towards their achievement certificate. However, as a hunter, if you're not registered, you would not get any award because nobody knows you're in the system. But then once you're registered, you can actually claim a number of awards, usually based on the number of QSOs, the number of separate parks that you've hunted. And there could be things like you've hunted all states, and a lot of really interesting awards that would be granted. And you can, because self-spotting is allowed in the POTA system and the POTA website, some hunters go in and actually look at the spot website and then try and contact and then QSOs with people that are spotted. Personally, I find it more fun to sort of randomly encounter POTA activators. And so I usually have certain frequency ranges on 20 and 40 meters that I scan, because that's usually where those activations take place. So usually in the upper range of the 20 and 40 meter band. Just to show, I've basically been able to hunt a number of states, not as many as I would have liked. But the cool thing is I got 100 different parks that I was able to pick up over the last year or so. As an activator, you do need to be registered. After each activation, you have to submit an activation log. And the best thing to do is to self-spot prior to an activation. So I go into that a little bit, how to do that. The other thing that's really, really critical is to actually understand where the boundary elements are of a given park or trail. The reason is if you are near a park, but you're not actually in the park, that does not count as a activation. So you basically, if you want to have a successful activation, you have to be sure you're in the within the official boundaries of the park or trail that you're activating. If you're activating a park, you have to be in the park within the boundaries. If you're activating a trail, you can be within 100 feet of that trail, and that serves not to block any pedestrian or equestrian traffic on the trail you're trying to do. So that I think I spend an over proportional amount of effort to really understand what, even before I go to a park, where I can actually set up shop and activate. The other thing is, of course, always abide by park and park ranger rules. I know from various HEM operators that sometimes rangers may not be familiar with the program. I've encountered that a little bit, but I usually carry some kind of informational flyers that I hand out in that instance. And so far, I've not been turned away once people knew what I was doing. But then your mileage may vary. There's some local parks or monuments where it's very, very difficult to activate because people concerned about building up antennas, even in a parking space or a parking spot. But then ultimately, park rangers and park rules say you can and cannot activate. If you run into issues and that's not a one-time occurrence, the best way to proceed is actually let POTA management know that these parks may be difficult or impossible to activate. Then that doesn't need to be said here, but always make sure when you do an activation that you're not creating sort of trip hazards in public spaces. And the kind of anemic picture here on the side basically shows I've been activating parks in California, Oregon, and fortunately also in Hawaii. And so I've basically landed 20 unique parks so far since I've been doing POTA. So what is my personal story? Why am I excited about POTA? So basically combines my two passions that I have, one for the outdoors and one for ham radio. And it's a great way to get out of the house and sort of enjoy nature, and at the same time sort of gain more experience in setting up stations in the field. Sometimes there's some really interesting challenges dependent on the location where you're setting up. Sometimes the challenge may be you have to set up a station in a parking lot. And I know some people use their mobile rigs that are car mounted, but I usually, if I can, I try to set up a station that is not exclusively contained within my vehicle. The other thing is you're very often dealing with compromised antenna situations. So you want to make sure you basically know how to, you may need a tuner, you may need to use an antenna that is directional. On some instances, I found you may have use a magnetic loop antenna if there's nothing else that works within the confines. The other thing is that comes along is you're kind of serving as an ambassador of ham radio to the public and park staff. So I have a little bit later on, kind of like a breakdown of what people thought I was doing in the field. And it's always a good teaching opportunity for people that may not have heard of ham radio or may not be quite as familiar with ham radio as it is still relevant today. And lastly, if you're into competitions and contests and into the sort of more competitive nature of radio, it's a great way to learn how to manage pileups in a lower pressure setting than it might be during competition day. So a regular POTA workflow involves finding the park of interest. Generally, I like to do sort of computational offsite recon, understand what the park is about, look at the park's website to understand boundaries, understand the topography, because that may dictate antenna choice. Then select a station, either my QRP rig that I use for activations or my mobile rig. You then have to decide on when to activate and spot. A lot of parks don't have internet access, so you pretty much have to, if you want to use spotting as a means of announcing you're going to do an activation, you pretty much have to do that before you start your journey. You then can deal with managing pileups and public interactions. In my experience, they happen usually simultaneously. Then, of course, a lot of people, probably 1/3 of activations are in MORS, CW, and in the more competitive areas of POTA, people start using digital modes like FT8 and FT4. You then have to log your QSOs and submit the logs, and eventually you'll be presenting with awards if you are successful. So how do I go on about finding a park near myself? So I'm basically go to the POTA website, which contains a map. That map indicates where specific parks are. These parks are designated with a K number and 4 numbers. So Torrey Pines is K3581. Once I've selected that park, I'm usually presented with a information sheet that shows who's been activating the park, what mode they were using. And I sort of randomly saw when I compiled the presentation that actually K6RJF beat me by 2 QSOs in Torrey Pines state conservation area the other days, which is great. So you get a lot of information. What I personally find exciting is some of these parks, they've actually never been activated before. And so that could be for 2 reasons. One, they just got added recently, or they may present some very unique challenges related to access or not being able to use antennas or so on. So it's always kind of fun to understand why something hasn't been activated. As I mentioned earlier, really critical to establish the park boundaries and where in a park you can activate. You here see in Torrey Pines State Natural Reserve, anything that is green is considered within the boundary of the park. So I usually make sure I'm well within that boundary where I set up shop. And then I usually look at a topography mapping apps like from CalTopo to figure out a location that may be an overlook or that may give me a good radio horizon. So I usually come prepared with a couple of maps before I go to the park. Then I would spot myself or actually announce that I will be activating the park. So the park reference goes here. You can basically say when you expect it to be there, when you expect it to end your activation, what frequency or what band you're on, and then any comments that you may have. So either say CW or digital or a single sideband. So the other thing I find important is you also want to activate alternative locations just in case a park is closed, which has happened quite frequently during pandemic days. And you also want to be aware that some parks may be maybe have locations that are part of multiple entities, like different parks, like Anza Borrega, for example, Pacific Crest Trail. That is a very, very nice location to simultaneously activate two entities in the program. Then once I scheduled my advance activation notice, I usually go. Sometimes when you don't have an opportunity, say you're driving by a park and you want to activate it and you don't have cell coverage and you still try and be spotted, there are ways to be picked up by the reverse beacon network if you're doing CW, or you could announce it in JS8 call or via APRS if you have coverage on VHF. So there are different ways to announce that. These spots then get announced on the POTA website. It's called pota.app. That is the website that everybody uses to see which parks are being activated. So you get your call sign, you get your K number, which corresponds to a specific park. It tells you what frequency you're on, where the park is in terms of location, and if anybody heard that station is also here. If you're a hunter, what I usually do is I respot the person I just worked, just to kind of tell the world they're still active as a station. POTA etiquette, really, really critical, because it's a very popular program, and you always, by operating, you want to be a really good ambassador, not to your own operating skills, but also to the program. So there's you basically in CW, there's established sequence. So you call CQ POTA, repeat your call sign twice, give the park number, and by doing so, you're not only announcing that you're calling CQ for the POTA program, but also that specific sequence is picked up by the reverse beacon network and is used to designate an activated spot. So that is really critical to get the sequence right. For digital, there are currently no ways to designate a park, but what a lot of people do is they call it CQ POTA, call sign, and the grid square that the person's activating from. And then single sideband, a lot of people call CQ and say the band they're operating on, parks on the air, announce the call sign, the park number, and then they usually, once they're spotted, they get a lot of people participating. So good pilot management skills are important. I think my sort of pet peeve with single sideband is that sometimes the activator doesn't give their call sign frequent enough. So if I don't use the or even if I do use the spotting program, I usually don't know who is calling CQ until much later. So I usually try and kind of give my call sign once I work one station, so people know what my call sign is. There's a way to call park to park. So basically that gives you extra points. So if you're activating a park and somebody else is activating a park, you yourself try and use park to park. I usually use my call sign then to just announce that it's me operating from a different park. And the convention is people usually work park to park station first, and then they open it up to other hunters that may not be in the park. Of course, be prepared to QSY. I find sometimes the time it takes to spot yourself, so you basically check if the frequency is in use. You then spot yourself. And then sometimes what I found is what happens is right around the time when I'm about to call a CQ, some other station may be using a band. There's a net happening on exactly that frequency. And so it may take more than one cycle to really choose the right frequency. And usually what I then do is I ask to be respotted, and people usually do that in a POTA community. And of course, all FCC rules and good ham operating practices always apply to the POTA. The awards, basically POTA website gives you a number of different awards that are listed here. There are different categories. There's a tremendous amount. It's quite complex actually to figure out what to do in order to get some of those awards. And sometimes it's very surprising. A good example is I was activating on a day after New Year's Day, and suddenly I got a New Year's Activator Award, which I didn't realize existed. So it's always full of surprises. A website, I think, is well designed with good dashboards that tell you basically, for example, I know I've activated 20 parks, unique parks, and then I know I have to activate another 10 before I could land another award. So the question really is, there you go, what is a rapid deployment? How does rapid deployment fit in a POTA? And so usually you associate POTA with sort of leisurely going into a park, setting up station, making a QSOs, and then packing up end of the day and go home. And for the people that like a little bit more of a challenge, there's the so-called Rapid Deployment Award. So that adds basically movement to a portable operating. And so if you look at the our local map, you see there are number 15 park locations on the coastline from the border to Oceanside. And actually what you could do is within the radar award scheme, you could actually activate all 15 or at least 12 of those parks, as long as you travel more than roughly 3.5 miles between the parks. And so what you could do is you could basically activate land, I believe it's 5 QSOs, although I've also heard people like to make 10 QSOs in each park, and then they move on to the next park, and so on and so forth. And so there's some very, very unique challenges there with operating like that, because if you're dealing with that many parks and you want to activate within a Zulu day, you pretty much have to plan your trip, and you have to carefully plan your QSOs. What I find is, especially considering our unique beach locations in San Diego, there are many stations that would take too long to set up, or where you're really spatially limited. And so what I usually so basically say as well, expect the state parks are typically crowded, the beach parking lots are mostly full, and there's so many people on the beach that you cannot really set up an antenna. And so for those kind of instances, you pretty much assume if you want to do some rapid deployment in the San Diego community, you pretty much expect you're going to be stuck in your car or near your car in a single parking spot at a beach, and there's going to be a lot of foot traffic. So it's an unfair competitive advantage. You probably can use a mobile rig and a screwdriver antenna and do your activations that way, and that is all within the it's permitted based on POTA rules to be in your car as long as you're within the beach, in the park boundary. You really can do an activation. And the next best solution is you can design stations and antennas that can be set up within 5 minutes and broken down within 5 minutes or less. And that's probably kind of the approach that I usually like to do, because if you're stuck for hours in your car in a beach parking lot during summer, that is not that pleasant. So much better to be outside. So what I found is not a surprise that the antenna setup time is really the sort of critical step that you want to watch, because it can take you a few minutes to set up an antenna, or it can take you 20 minutes to set up or tune an antenna. And so you want to really cut down on the setup time by wisely choosing your antenna. And there are a number of wire resonant antennas that people like, don't need a tuner. The challenge is always they may not be workable in small spaces. But then, as I'll show you later, a ROP K6 RGF has a setup later in my presentation that is actually quite amenable to those type of activities. I personally struggle with counterpoise wires, and I've can be trip hazards. There may not be enough space to lay out your counterpoise. I personally struggle with kind of trying to come back with winding them back in a way so they don't end up as a mess. And that all takes precious time. So my solution had been, and kind of went through that pretty much sequentially. Magnetic loop antennas, I personally like them. They're very space efficient, but then tuning can take significant time if you use an antenna tuner. So you have to make a connection, break a connection, tune your antenna to the right frequency, make the connection again with your rig, and that all takes iterations and precious time. There are also significant issues when these are placed near metal surfaces like your car. Then that's an antenna that I've learned to like, albeit it's not very useful for small parking spots. That's the Chameleon, they call it tactical delta loop antenna, a great antenna for POTA if you have the space. A screwdriver antenna, basically, you effectively use your car as a counterpoise. And then verticals, I do like for limited spaces. And then and there's some YouTube deployments out there that people can watch. Some people just drop a wire from a bridge or an outlook to get a functional antenna for a POTA. The other thing is, if you're into using digital modes during a POTA, and a lot of people in the stuff that are more competitive, they started using FT8 and FT4. There's some very unique challenges in the field. Well, my personal opinion, and is absolutely my personal opinion, REDI is underappreciated. And so a lot of those issues that people have with FT8 and FT4 would not exist in REDI because it's a not time synchronized communication. But then if you're using FT8 and FT4, technical things, if you use FT8 and FT4 during radar, it's basically a lot of people in the POTA community use it for a very sort of rapid, effective communication. The biggest challenge, of course, is both FT8 and especially FT4 they are time synchronized. So the transmission occur in a carefully time synchronized cycle. The challenges, especially with PC, so Windows-based operating systems in the field, is that the time synchronization, you get a tremendous amount of time drifts that can be in the seconds since you leave your house and arriving at a park. And so the most critical thing is, if you use these digital modes, is to actually re-establish time synchronization, so you can effectively use these modes of digital communication. And so the two solution that work for me is I have a external GPS dongle that I use in areas where I get good GPS coverage. And I use a software package, BKT TimeSync, which basically uses the lock on GPS satellites to very precisely determine and then set the computer clock. Now, there are some areas dependent on the terrain where you may not get a good GPS lock, at least certain times of the day. And so in those kind of instances, I found that there's another software it's called JT Sync, which basically averages the time differential of decoded QSOs and then can adjust the computer clock. So basically listens at the time differential of all the QSOs that occur. And then it basically allows you to average these times to basically adjust the clock. And so really key for those that are using these type of modes is understanding, especially in FT4, it is very, very critical to be within less than half a second. So your computer clock has to be plus minus less than half a second precise for your QSO and your traffic to be decoded. And so that's same time, FT4 is a great means to be in an uncrowded space of the spectrum to make a QSO. Again, all that wouldn't be an issue with CW or REDI, but then a lot of the competitive POTA folks start using FD8 and FD4. So what kind of setup do I use? I have basically two principal kits that I use. My QRP Lite, what I call QRP Lite, is a backpack that contains my ICOM 705 QRP radio, puts out up to 10 watts if you have a external battery. I kind of designed the kit so it's TSA friendly, and so it doesn't give me any issues when I do air travel. Current battery limitation that's really important is your battery has to be at or below 144 watt hours, a lithium iron phosphate battery to make it as carry-on. In fact, the only thing you can do these days is take batteries into your carry-on, but then they have to be below a certain capacity to be allowed on board of an aircraft. I use a number of different types of antenna, depending on the location. Am I going to be in a desert? Am I going to be in forested area? Am I going to be on the beach? Of course, there's a weight limit, not so much for the airline, but more for my back. And then what I found is I have my rig tuner, and then you use a Chameleon MPAS light antenna, and then use a Surface Go 2, which also fits into a backpack as a portable laptop. Probably see from this image here, I still do paper logging, and always like to do that while even if I'm using digital modes, because I can so I have a second list of reference to make sure whatever QSO was recorded was actually a real QSO. Then, of course, for all the local parts, I use my QRO heavy outfit, which heavy probably because of the Jeep here, but also I have two rigs, one which is permanently mounted, Yaesu FT891 with an ATAS 120 antenna. And then I have in a Go kit seen here, have a 7300 with a MFJ IntelliTuner, an MPass2 antenna, and a Delta loop that all fit into the Go box. And then I either use Dell or a Surface Go as my computer for logging, for WinLink, or whatever else I can do with that computer. The Go box is small enough and light enough so I could carry it to a picnic area if needed. And then basically I spent a lot of thoughts on what kind of antennas I take to what kind of outing. The other learning I had over the last year is that it's very hard, if not impossible, to make SSB single sideband contacts with 10 watts. I think I was only able to make one, and that was barely at the at level where we could understand each other. And so I find for if you're routinely doing a single sideband, you definitely want to go a little bit add some power to your setup. So that's a couple pictures from the field. So that's activating a K1126 Anza Borrega near Mount Laguna. And so that's you see my vertical antenna due to the location. The good thing about location is I can use a counterpoise, which I usually string along the fence, and then I have my vertical here. And if I can, I mount it as far away from the car, so 50 feet or so from the car if I can. And then I operate from the tailgate, just like that here. In that particular instance, I was actually doing a communication exercise, and I just took advantage of the location to activate both the Anza Borrega and actually also happens to be the Pacific Crest Trail that intersects here. So other POTA activators, Rob K6 RJF. So he has a setup that looks to me like he's using a body pole, a dipole antenna that is mounted at a quite a nice elevation. And so he uses, he has this kind of probably antenna mast mount that you can drive on and secure to your car. And it's a very stable setup to perform activations here. And Rob, like myself, we of course have a radio, a tuner, and then a computer. And I noted from the paper here, Rob also likes to do paper logs in addition to what happens on the computer. My favorite part by far is the sort of K3457 Lake Paris area. And the reasons my favorite is you have a tremendous amount of space. You can basically, you see here my inverted delta loop setup, which is my favorite antenna for doing POTA. You basically place the antenna 50 feet away from your station. So basically I'm because of the soft canopy structures here, I can set up a station in the shade, which I like. Then basically for those type of activations, I take my Go box, I have an external battery, and then I have a box that houses like all sort of bits and pieces, different types of antennas, usually have a couple slopers, just in case I find a good structure, a good tree, cables, computer, food, and drinks. So the reason I like the setup is because you have a tremendous amount of space. You can put the antenna far away from your station, so it minimizes potential interference, and like in this case, since the inverted delta loop at certain frequency is directional, I can also take the opportunity to move it into different directions. And so I think I almost made 45 or 47 QSOs in that particular location, and it's definitely on my list to go back. Of course, none of my presentation would be complete was confessing some big blunders that happened to me over the last over my POTA experience. And I think the biggest and saddest thing that happened to me was I actually got the Zulu day transition wrong. And so just as a refresher for POTA, you need to activate within the Zulu day to count that as a single activation. If you basically spread your activation before and after Zulu day transition, that actually counts as two separate activations. And so because I probably still remembered summertime, I had some mental thought what the transition time was like. I basically drove 125 miles to K4545 near Joshua Tree. So, excuse me, so excited to activate the park, and as conditions were a little bit difficult, I said, okay, I'm gonna stop right here at 10 QSOs. Thought I had it all right, and then after submitting it a couple of days later, the bad news was I split my QSOs between my 10 QSOs between 2 Zulu days, and of course that didn't count as activation. So very disappointed. Then the other one that was more a challenge was in near the Bay Area in K1203. I tried all modes that I could muster to make an activation, and all I could was land one particular QSO, which was really disappointing. So not sure what was happening there. And then, of course, this beautiful picture is up in Big Bear, by my favorite locations to go camping with the family. And I've basically been out here. I think I was trying to reach a ARES HF net that particular time. And all along, I didn't realize I was in K4463 and easily could have activated that park from that location. But then, of course, I'm quite happy because now it gives me another opportunity to go back there for a beautiful outing and try the whole activation again. Some fun facts. What always excites me is if I am the first ham operator to activate a specific park that had never been activated before. And I was very fortunate to land 2 first activations in Oregon and different parks, and 2 on Maui, state of Hawaii. And then, of course, I also get a lot of questions from the curious public, and something that I had not anticipated when I started doing POTA. The common question wasn't, okay, what kind of antenna is that? Or are you listening to radio? The majority of people that have interacted with me so far asked if I'm communicating with space aliens. And that was a very unexpected occurrence. I think between the folks that asked me, then basically a number of people that call them space aliens are ET, but I also had a couple more recently that calls them UAPs, which to me means that they're actually quite interested in these unexplained aerial phenomena. Aerial meaning air and not aerials, as antennas are called in England. Second closest majority thought I'm listening to radio or TV, so I always commend that. And then the minority, unfortunately, thinks that I'm a ham operator. But then there were two individuals, and that I shall single out in my next slide, W8TAM and WT8J. They actually, when they encountered me, thought I was doing a POTA activation when I was activating K5633, which is Carlsbad State Beach. And in fact, they actually asked me if I was activating K5633. So basically, what happened was I was out on Cardiff State Park with 40 minutes to spare before the Zulu time transition. And then Tom and Julie, so Tom W8TAM and Julie WT8J from the POTA organization stopped by to activate just as I finished setting up my antenna in the parking lot. And so I was very impressed that I randomly encountered them in the field. So we, on the fly, because we at that point probably had closer to 35 minutes, developed a band plan on the fly. I had three Qs among each other on VHF and UHF from 20 feet away, which is illegal according to POTA rules. And all three of us still managed to activate the park before the next Zulu Day transition occurred. So that was a very, very interesting and exciting occurrence. We chat a little bit afterwards about the POTA program, and it actually turns out not only were Tom and Julie my first encounter of fellow hams that were doing POTA in a specific park, but actually, even though they're part of the POTA organization, I was their first sort of random, unscheduled person that they encountered in the field, all the way in California, because they actually live in Michigan. So it was probably the really cool experience. So just in summary, I hopefully convinced you that POTA is a fun ham radio activity. Hopefully managed to convince you why rapid deployment can be quite a challenge. I think San Diego is actually a great location for that, because you have a number of parks that should fit within a 24-hour challenge. And then the other take home was really focus on the kind of how quickly you can set up and take down an antenna in the field if you want to take on such a challenge. I'd like to finish the presentation by thanking my Elmers and people I encountered that make POTA fun. Actually, first person that introduced me to POTA was Tom N6XDX, random occurrence. He was not activating a field, but he was testing an antenna on Double Peak, where I was participating in some ARES related activity. And so he introduced me to POTA by giving me a flyer and helping me out about talking about activation spots and strategies. Of course, Tom and Julie, the first POTA activator encounters, and being part of the organization that keep POTA alive. Then Michael KB9 VBR and Thomas K4 SWL, my favorite POTA YouTubers, especially Thomas. If you're into CW and you want to hone your CW listening skills, Thomas actually reports his YouTubes in real time. And so you can, by sort of closing your eyes, you can basically get kind of follow that along if you want to sort of improve in CW. Of course, Rob K6 RJF, I'd like to thank for inviting me to present, for continuously challenging me, but also Rob is actually the only ham that I know that has landed a fiver park to park. And so fiver means Rob landed QSO with somebody that was in 5 park areas or trail areas all at the same time. And so that is a major bragging rights. And lastly, of course, I'd like to thank SDG ARES for being a phenomenal organization to help keep our community safe in times when traditional communications may not be possible. So thanks to all, and hope you're still awake at this early hour.
Marty, excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. So very good. Are there any questions for Marty?
Yes, I have one.
Okay, go ahead, Patrick.
Marty, where you go about getting your list of state parks here in San Diego County? Because at one point in time, it appears to be a little bit convoluted and you only saw 1 or 2, but I understand based on your presentation, there are a few more that were not originally listed.
Excellent question, Patrick. I think there's 2 issues that I saw previously with the website, the POTA website. One was dependent on the choice of browser that you were using. It always landed me in the Atlantic Ocean when I basically said I use my current location. And so I had to manually scroll over to Southern California. I think the other issue was all parks hadn't been added at some stage, but then if you go, and I'll see if I can pull it up really quickly. Let me just share a different, just stop sharing, and I'll share a different screen. 1 second, Patrick. Can you see the activation map, Parks on the Air, Patrick?
Yes,
Right.
I can.
Excellent. So if you go to map, and then it prompts you like use your current location. So now you see all the parks that are alive in Southern California. I think the challenge I always found was a lot of the location, like especially in the Encinitas area, they can be super crowded. Like there can be parking lots where basically you can fit 1 or 2 cars. And so that is a unique challenge. But then you have other areas like for example, the Anza Borrega area. You have 1 location, like here, the Anza Borrega Desert State Park. But then in reality, you as long as you stay within those boundaries, you can set up anywhere in that state park. But then I think I'm trying to think what is a good location. I think if you go to the Northern California Bay Area, so Half Moon Bay, you see that there's a much higher density of parks. And so I think due to the size of some of the parks and a specific location, Southern California, you're a little bit more limited. Now, from an award perspective, doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, because they're actually so-called repeat offender awards, that if you always go to the same park, and you always land QSOs there, after a certain amount of QSOs, you get some of those type of awards. But then, yeah, I do think I'm so slowly running out of unique parks here in the area.
Thank you. And to the group, I have to leave. I understand that they are having a Zoom for my cousin's funeral. It's currently being broadcasted. So you guys have a good day.
My condolences.
All right, do we have any other questions?
Marty, this is Rob. Just a comment. I've noticed while doing activations, how quickly we can accumulate 10 or 20 QSOs. You say, oh gosh, that was exhausting. How many hours was I on the air? And you check the clock and you're only on for 20 minutes and you're done.
That is right. So it's the pileup phenomenon. I think people, some people look for activation spots and they just dial in the frequency. I think like if I do that, and I know there's certain QSOs I can land in Texas and in Florida without any effort. And so if I see somebody pop up, I'll just dial the frequency, and so that does everybody else. I think pileups, I've seen people get 20, 30 QSOs within half an hour if they're on a single sideband. But yeah, it's a great way to manage, to learn how to manage pileups for myself.
All right, any additional questions?
Marty, what was your first park?
First park was Torrey Pines. It's right by the museum up there. I basically used my 705, and it was a really great setup. Good way to spend your Saturday morning.
All right, I don't see any more in chat or anybody's hand up. Thanks, Marty. That was great. Learned a lot. A lot more to it than I thought. And I haven't done it, so I just don't get out and do that. But something I may have to look at. Might be fun. Sounds like it's a lot of fun.
And anybody who ever wants to follow or do a joint activation, I'm always happy to come out to a park.
All right, sounds good. Sounds good. All right, if there are no further questions, we'll go ahead and close the meeting down today. Thanks everybody for being there. Be safe. And we will have a next ARES meeting second Saturday of next month.
Thanks, Marty. That was awesome.
Oh, thank you, Ted.
Appreciate it, Marty. Very good. Learned a lot.
Thank you.
Jay, you gonna activate?
Not this week. I don't have a little I don't have a portable radio. I have to take my 705 or my 7300. So haven't bought a radio yet, and I still want to see that little vertical antenna you have. I did look up the Chameleon that you referred to. It's a pretty pricey system there.
That's the downside of Chameleon. They are, I would say, they are overpriced for what they are. At the same time, they are probably very robust. So I think they, I think the kind of the vertical is, I would say, has survived some very adverse conditions in Hawaii, meaning being dropped in the ocean, being banged around in luggage, and it's still working great. So I think from a robustness perspective, it was, I've not seen something that's more robust than that, short of a wire.
Yeah, I've got one of their Chameleons up. It's I need to go up there and have a look at it. It's if I run FT8 on it for a while, it seems to get hot and then wig out. But it checks out okay when it's cold. So
Jay, which Chameleon is that?
I think it's just a dipole. I don't remember. I think it's a TDL light or something like that. Let me go look.
Yeah, the balun for that, or the transformer for that, is for digital. I've upgraded mine because I think you can run very low power. I think it's 25 or 30 Okay.
So it's a TD light.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you upgraded the balun on yours. That was the idea.
Yeah,
So
for
so
the
don't run high power on it. Okay.
I got a chameleon end fed, the 60 footer, and it's like, yeah, it was, I tried it once and I've got to try it more. The Palomar seems to work, then it's 9-to-1 versus 5-to-1.
Hey, Marty, I was interested in the battery situation you referenced regarding air travel and TSA.
Hmm.
How big was the battery for that? What is the largest you could take?
Let me show you so the one I took to Hawaii, just unplug that. For the, I just used a really small one. So this runs a 9 amp hour battery. So the it's 108 watt hours. That's well within the regs.
What was the reg again?
I think it's 150. So the only other that's a little bit more capacity is this guy, which has 144 watt hours. I think the limit last time I checked was 150.
And what I'm thinking about is containment of that. How many inches do you think that is? About 10 or 9 inches or something like that? The bigger one?
The bigger one is, about 10 inches.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure the dimensions of the containment bags on the aircraft, but the reason you can't put it in cargo, you have to bring it with you, is because the systems in the cargo compartments cannot control the fire that would happen from one of those batteries. And the only solution is to cool it with water and ice. And when possible, they use a special glove and put it inside of a containment bag and seal it. That's the best they can do, and get on the ground as soon as possible. But so I wonder if that would fit in the standard containment bag, and if that was something they were smart enough to think about when they made the reg.
I mean, I think the one question I have is if there are different specs for lithium and lithium iron phosphate, because the lithium iron phosphate in theory, they're very hard to ignite, unlike the lithium polymer or other type batteries. But all I saw in the regs was basically capacity. I didn't see dimensions being mentioned there, which is actually an excellent point. If they use smaller bags, that
Yeah, so I wonder, it's great, definitely, that there's a new technology that is less prone to fire. Super happy to hear about that. And I hope to see more batteries of that sort in the future. I'm no chemist and have very little knowledge within it, but yeah, I wonder if any thinking went into that, or if it was based on the LiPo batteries of the time when it was written.
Not sure. I would say I've not seen a specific mention of the type. Just basically, you can only have this much in lithium or similar batteries, but they may have updated the regs. I didn't check recently. I personally, for the 705, sorry, it doesn't really show the thing. This one is probably 5 inches by 4 inches by 4 inches. That is like I think I charged the battery and I did all my activations when I was in Maui, and I never had to recharge it.
That's awesome. Very good.
Marty, I've taken to writing the year of purchase on my bioanno batteries, so that when I'm picking one up, or deciding which one to take someplace, it's like new battery, old battery.
This is great. Yeah, no, this is great. In 5-10 years.
I think it's a 5-year unconditional warranty on Bioenno. We'll just swap them out if there's any problem.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
How much are those batteries, by the way? The smaller one?
I think there was when I bought it was 85, and the larger one was 120. So definitely there's the more capacity, the up to a point, the more capacity, the cheaper it gets per watt hour.
Yeah, the Bioennos are bioennopower.com is the website. And the Southern California sales rep, Kevin, often puts the batteries up for door prizes at Hamfest. So I think half of the Bioennos I own, I got as door prizes at Hamfest.
Wow. Are the prices for those very competitive at HRO?
Same price.
Yeah, okay.
They don't fix prices, but they're all the same.
Actually, HRO sometimes they're like $5 cheaper than what you buy at the other places.
Well, great presentation, Marty. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for giving the opportunity.
Have a great day, guys.
Yeah, you
Take care,
too.
Ted. Dave, I'm going to check out so you can close out the video, and then we'll do post-production on it.
All right, we'll go ahead and shut this down and get to the post copy.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Hey, Mike.